When I entered the courtroom that morning, the judge dropped his gavel in shock. The metallic clang echoed through the chamber like a gunshot in a cathedral. He looked at me with those wide, disbelieving eyes, the same eyes that once sat in the front row of my constitutional law lectures 20 years ago, and whispered, "Professor Elena, why are you here?" The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop on marble. My daughter's husband froze in his chair like a deer caught in headlights. His smirking lawyer went pale as fresh snow. The court reporter's fingers stopped moving across her machine. Everyone knew something had just shifted. The very air in that room changed, became electric, dangerous. I stood there in my simple black dress, my gray hair pulled back in the same bun I'd worn for 30 years of teaching, my weathered hands clutching a leather briefcase that had seen more battles than most soldiers. And in that moment of silence, I felt the weight of every sleepless night, every tear my daughter had cried, every bruise she'd tried to hide from me. Before I continue with this story that will shake you to your core, give this video a like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because what happened next, what I discovered about my own son-in-law, what I had to do to save my daughter and granddaughter, this story will change how you see justice forever. You want to know why I was there? You want to understand how a retired law professor ends up representing her own daughter in a custody battle that would make headlines across the state? Then listen closely, because this story begins in the darkest corner of my heart, in a place where mother's love meets the cold steel of the law. The courtroom that day smelled of polished wood and fear. Sharp echoes bounced off the high ceilings every time someone shifted in their seat. Camera flashes went off like lightning strikes, because yes, the media had caught wind of this case. The cold scent of furniture polish couldn't mask the tension that hung in the air like smoke. I am Elena Morales, 68 years old, retired professor of constitutional law at the State University. For 35 years, I taught young minds about justice, about the sacred balance of our legal system, about how the law exists to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. I believed in those principles with every fiber of my being. I taught them like gospel truth. But that morning, walking into Judge Daniel Reyes's courtroom, my former student, my pride and joy who had grown up to wear those black robes with such dignity, I wasn't Professor Morales. I was just a mother. A broken, furious, desperate mother who had watched her daughter's life get destroyed by a monster wearing a wedding ring. The defendant sat there with his perfect haircut and his expensive suit, looking every inch the successful entrepreneur he pretended to be. Victor Mendoza, my daughter's husband, the father of my granddaughter. The man who had systematically, methodically, cold-bloodedly destroyed everything beautiful in my child's life. And as I took my seat behind my daughter Camila, as I watched her trembling hands and saw the hollow look in her once bright eyes, I felt something I had never experienced in all my years of studying law, the pure, white-hot desire for vengeance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how we got here. You need to feel the weight of the years that led to this moment, the tears and blood and sacrifice that built the foundation for what was about to unfold. 23 years ago, my world collapsed in the span of a single phone call. My husband, Miguel, my partner, my best friend, the father of my 7-year-old daughter, died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday evening. One moment I was grading papers at the kitchen table, waiting for him to come home from his job at the construction site. The next moment, a police officer was standing at my door with his hat in his hands and sorrow in his eyes. I remember falling to my knees on the tile floor of our tiny kitchen. I remember Camila running to me, her small arms wrapping around my neck, asking why Mommy was crying. I remember looking into her innocent brown eyes, so much like her father's, and realizing that my grief would have to wait. This little girl needed me to be strong. The months that followed were a blur of struggle and sacrifice that would have broken a lesser woman. I was an adjunct professor then, barely making enough to pay rent, living paycheck to paycheck. Miguel's construction job had no life insurance, no pension, no safety net. Just a widow and her daughter alone in a world that suddenly seemed impossibly vast and cold. I worked 3 jobs. I taught morning classes at the community college, tutored high school students in the afternoons, and graded papers for other professors late into the night. My fingers bled from chalk dust. My eyes burned from reading essay after essay under the dim light of our kitchen lamp. But my heart never stopped teaching. Never stopped believing that education was the path to a better life. There were nights when I fell asleep at that kitchen table, my head resting on a stack of constitutional law textbooks, while Camila did her homework beside me. There were mornings when we had cereal for breakfast because I couldn't afford anything else. There were moments when the weight of being both mother and father, both protector and provider, nearly crushed me. But through it all, I made my daughter a promise. I can still see her face that night when she was 9 years old, the same age my granddaughter is now. She had been crying because some boy at school had told her that girls weren't as smart as boys, that she should focus on being pretty instead of getting good grades. I knelt down in front of her, took her small face in my work-worn hands, and said, "Camila, listen to me carefully. No matter what happens in this life, no matter how hard things get, I will make sure no man ever silences your voice. You are brilliant, you are strong, and you deserve to be heard. I promise you that." She believed me. God help me, she believed every word. For 15 years, I kept that promise. I worked myself to the bone to put her through college. I watched with pride as she graduated with honors, as she started her own small marketing business, as she grew into the confident, successful woman I always knew she could become. And then Victor Mendoza walked into her life like a disease wearing a smile. He was charming at first, I'll give the devil his due. Tall, handsome, successful. He owned an import-export business that seemed to be thriving. He drove a luxury car, wore tailored suits, spoke about his dreams with passion and conviction. When Camila brought him home for the first time, I wanted to like him. I wanted to believe that my daughter had found someone worthy of her love. The wedding was beautiful. Small, intimate, held in the garden of our local church. Victor's parents had flown in from Chile, dignified people with kind eyes and warm smiles. They embraced me like family, called me Abuela Elena, with such warmth that it melted my cautious heart. I walked my daughter down the aisle that day, my arm linked with hers, my heart full of hope and gratitude. She was radiant in her simple white dress, her face glowing with happiness. As I placed her hand in Victor's, as I watched him promise to love and cherish her forever, I thought my job was done. I thought I could finally rest, finally allow myself to believe that my daughter's future was secure. For the first year, it seemed like a fairy tale. They moved into a beautiful house in the suburbs. Camila's business continued to grow. 9 months after the wedding, my granddaughter Sophia was born, perfect, precious, with Camila's eyes and Miguel's stubborn chin. Laughter filled their home. Sunday dinners became weekly celebrations. Victor seemed devoted to his wife and daughter. I should have seen the signs. I should have noticed how gradually, subtly, Victor began to change. But love makes us blind, doesn't it? Hope makes us stupid. It started with small things. Comments about Camila's appearance. You should wear makeup to dinner, mi amor. You want to look nice for your family, don't you? Suggestions about her business. Maybe you should focus more on home life now that we have Sophia. Your little marketing company can wait. Then came the financial control. Victor convinced Camila to combine their bank accounts for simplicity. He took over paying the bills to reduce her stress. He started questioning every purchase she made, every dollar she spent. Why do you need new clothes? You have a closet full. Why are you buying organic food? Regular groceries are fine. Why are you spending money on books for Sophia? She's only 3. The isolation came next. Old friends suddenly became bad influences. Family gatherings became too stressful for new parents. Camila's business client meetings became unnecessary when Victor could provide for the family. I watched my confident, successful daughter slowly disappear, replaced by a quiet, anxious woman who apologized for everything and asked permission for nothing because she had learned that asking only led to arguments. The first time I saw the bruises, my blood turned to ice. It was a Tuesday evening. I had come over to babysit Sophia while Camila attended a rare business meeting. She was wearing a long-sleeved blouse despite the summer heat, and when she reached up to get Sophia's jacket from the coat closet, the sleeve slipped down. Purple fingerprints around her wrist. Dark, ugly marks that could only come from being grabbed too hard, held too tight, hurt too deliberately. Our eyes met across the room. Hers filled with shame and fear. Mine filled with a rage so pure it nearly blinded me. "Camila," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Who did this to you?" She pulled her sleeve down quickly, forced a bright smile onto her face. "It's nothing, Mama. I'm clumsy, you know that." I bumped into the door frame carrying groceries. But I knew. God in heaven, I knew. That night, after she left for her meeting and Sophia was asleep, I sat in Victor's living room, their living room, and stared at the family photos on the mantel. Happy pictures from the wedding, vacation snapshots, images of what looked like the perfect family. And I felt something die inside me. Some last vestige of innocence, some final faith in the goodness of the world. When Victor came home that night, I was still sitting there in the dark. "Elena." He seemed surprised to see me. "Where's Camila?" "Business meeting," I said quietly, not trusting myself to say more. He nodded, loosened his tie, went to pour himself a drink. "She's been working too much lately. I keep telling her she needs to prioritize the family." The casual dismissal in his voice, the subtle criticism disguised as concern, it was like listening to a snake speak. For 35 years, I had taught students about predators who hide in plain sight, about abusers who master the art of public charm and private cruelty. But this was my daughter. This was my family. This wasn't supposed to happen to us. "Victor," I said, standing up slowly. "I need you to know something. I need you to understand who you're dealing with." He turned to look at me, that perfect smile still plastered on his face. "Of course, Elena. We're family. I have spent my entire career studying the law. I know what abuse looks like. I know what control looks like. I know what men like you do to women like my daughter." His smile flickered. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to see the darkness underneath. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," I said, stepping closer. "I'm telling you, if you ever hurt my daughter again, I will destroy you." He laughed. Actually laughed, like I had told him a joke. "Elena, I think you're letting your imagination run away with you. Camila and I are very happy. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of interfering in ours." That was my first mistake. I believed that my warning would be enough. I believed that confronting him directly would make him back down. I underestimated the kind of monster I was dealing with. The abuse got worse after that night. So much worse. Victor was smarter than most predators. He left no marks where they could be seen. He used emotional torture instead of physical violence. He convinced Camila that her memory was unreliable, that her emotions were excessive, that her concerns were symptoms of postpartum depression that had never really gone away. He isolated her completely. Phone calls to me became rare, then non-existent. Visits stopped altogether. When I tried to call the house, Victor would answer with that perfect, concerned voice. "Oh, Elena, Camila is sleeping. She's been having such a hard time lately. The doctor says she needs rest." My strong, brilliant daughter became a ghost. When I did see her, brief encounters at the grocery store, chance meetings at Sophia's school events, she was hollow-eyed and thin, jumping at unexpected sounds, apologizing for existing. And through it all, Victor played the role of the devoted husband. He joined the country club, donated to local charities, coached Sophia's soccer team. To the outside world, he was the picture of success and family values. Behind closed doors, he was systematically destroying my daughter's soul. But I waited. I watched. I gathered information. Because 35 years of teaching law had taught me patience, had taught me that the most effective strikes come from careful preparation. I knew my moment would come. I just didn't know it would be so much worse than I imagined. 2 months ago, Victor filed for divorce. Not just any divorce. He claimed that Camila was mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and unfit to have custody of Sophia. He painted a picture of a woman who had lost touch with reality, who spent money recklessly, who couldn't be trusted with her own child's welfare. His lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit named Patterson, filed motion after motion. They claimed Camila had squandered the family's savings on frivolous business expenses. They presented medical records showing her visits to therapists and doctors, twisting her search for help into evidence of mental illness. They had testimony from neighbors who had heard arguments at the house, Victor's careful manipulation making Camila look like the aggressor. Most devastating of all, they wanted full custody of Sophia. They claimed that Camila's episodes made her dangerous to be around a child. They wanted supervised visits only, with Victor determining when and where they would occur. I watched my daughter receive those papers with shaking hands. I watched her crumble into a broken heap on my living room floor, sobbing that she was going to lose her baby, that Victor was right about her being crazy, that maybe Sophia would be better off without her. That night, I held my grown daughter like I had when she was 7 years old and her father had died. I smoothed her hair and whispered the same promises I had made all those years ago. But inside, I was planning war. 3 weeks before the custody hearing, I discovered something that changed everything. I couldn't sleep. Again. I had been staying at Camila's house. She was too afraid to be alone with Sophia now that Victor had moved out. And I was wandering the halls at 2 in the morning, my mind racing with legal strategies and desperate prayers. That's when I heard it. A voice coming from Sophia's room. But not Sophia's voice. Victor's voice. He had come into the house using his key, thinking we were all asleep. I heard him whispering to my 9-year-old granddaughter, and what I heard made my blood freeze in my veins. Sophia, Nina, listen to Daddy very carefully. When we go to see the judge next week, he's going to ask you some questions about Mommy. And you need to tell him the truth about how Mommy sometimes forgets things. But Mommy doesn't forget things, Daddy. She remembers everything. No, sweetheart. Sometimes Mommy forgets to feed you dinner. Sometimes she forgets to help you with your homework. Sometimes she gets so sad that she can't take care of you properly. Do you remember those times? I pressed myself against the wall outside her room, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. I don't remember that, Daddy. Think harder, Sophia. Remember when Mommy was crying in the kitchen and she didn't make lunch? Remember when she was on the phone with Abuela and forgot to help you brush your teeth? The manipulation in his voice was masterful. Patient, gentle, loving, but absolutely poisonous. He was rewriting my granddaughter's memories, turning normal moments of human struggle into evidence of neglect. I guess, maybe. That's right, mi amor. And if the judge asks, you tell him that sometimes Mommy forgets to take care of you. Because you want to keep living in the big house with Daddy, don't you? You don't want us to lose our home. My granddaughter's small voice, confused and frightened. Will we lose our house if I don't say that? Well, the judge might think that Mommy can't take care of you properly. And then we might have to live somewhere smaller, somewhere not as nice. But if you tell him the truth about Mommy's problems, then we can all stay together in our beautiful home. I gripped the door frame so hard my knuckles went white. This monster was coaching a 9-year-old child to lie in court. He was using her love for her mother, her fear of losing her home, her innocent desire to make everyone happy, to turn her into a weapon against her own mother. If the judge asks, tell him Mommy forgets to feed you. Do you want us to lose our house, Sophia? That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about custody. This wasn't just about control. This was about complete destruction. Victor wasn't content to take my daughter's freedom, her dignity, her self-worth. He wanted to take her child. He wanted to turn Sophia against her own mother, to create a living hell where Camila would be forced to watch her daughter believe lies about her for the rest of their lives. And he was using my granddaughter, my innocent, trusting, beautiful granddaughter, as his weapon. I stood in that hallway, listening to him poison my granddaughter's mind, and I felt something I had never felt before in my 68 years of life. Pure, murderous rage. The kind of anger that burns through every civilized thought, every legal constraint, every moral consideration. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't confront him. Because in that moment of white-hot fury, my legal mind kicked in. This was evidence. This was proof. This was the ammunition I needed to destroy him completely. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For 20 more minutes, I stood in that dark hallway and documented Victor Mendoza coaching his daughter to commit perjury. I recorded him teaching her to lie about her mother's care, to fabricate incidents of neglect, to present false testimony that would determine the custody of a child. When he finally left, slipping out through the back door like the snake he was, I went into Sophia's room. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with wide, troubled eyes. "Abuela? Is Mommy really sick?" I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothed her dark hair away from her forehead. "No, mi amor. Mommy is not sick. Mommy loves you more than anything in the world." But Daddy said, "Daddy is confused, sweetheart." Sometimes grown-ups say things when they're scared or angry that aren't true. But I want you to know something very important. You never have to lie for anyone. Not even for Daddy. Not even for me. The truth is always the right thing, even when it's hard. She nodded solemnly, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. The damage was already being done. That night, I sat in my daughter's kitchen with my laptop and began planning the most important legal strategy of my life. But first, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "Inspector Cruz? It's Elena Morales. I need your help." Carlos Cruz had been one of my students 15 years ago, but more than that, he had become like a son to me. He was retired now from the District Attorney's Ethics Investigation Unit, but I knew he still had connections, still had resources, still had the skills to dig up information that ordinary people couldn't access. "Professor Morales? It's 2 in the morning. Are you all right?" "No, Carlos. I'm not all right. And I need you to help me destroy a man who's trying to steal my granddaughter." There was a pause. "Then, I'll be there in an hour." For the next 2 weeks, Carlos and I worked like we were preparing for war. Because that's exactly what we were doing. Carlos used his connections to pull Victor's financial records. What we found was staggering. The successful import-export business was a front. Victor was running money through offshore accounts, laundering funds for clients whose names read like a who's who of organized crime. The luxury car, the beautiful house, the expensive lifestyle, all of it paid for with dirty money. But more than that, we discovered that Victor had been systematically draining Camila's business accounts. The frivolous business expenses his lawyer claimed she had wasted, those were transfers to Victor's personal accounts, disguised as business loans that were never repaid. The woman he was claiming was financially irresponsible had actually been funding his criminal enterprise with her own hard-earned money. We found the real estate documents showing that the house was bought entirely with Camila's business profits and a loan secured against her company. Victor's name was on the deed, but he had contributed nothing to the purchase. We found insurance policies that Victor had taken out on Camila without her knowledge, making himself the beneficiary of substantial life insurance payouts. Most damning of all, we found communications between Victor and his lawyer that showed they knew Camila was not mentally unstable. They had deliberately sought out a corrupt psychiatrist who would provide favorable testimony in exchange for payment. They had planned the entire mental health narrative as a legal strategy, not as a genuine concern for Camila's welfare. Every night, I came home to my daughter's house with another piece of evidence, another weapon in our arsenal. And every night, I watched Camila grow smaller, more defeated, more convinced that she was going to lose her daughter forever. "Mama," she said to me one evening as we sat in her kitchen, Sophia asleep upstairs. "Maybe Victor is right. Maybe I am too broken to be a good mother. Maybe Sophia would be better off with him." I took her hands in mine, hands that were still soft despite everything she had endured, hands that had once been so confident as they signed business contracts and held her baby daughter. "Camila," I said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are not a bad mother. You are a woman who has survived an attack on your very soul, and the fact that you're still here, still fighting, still loving your daughter with every breath in your body, proves how strong you really are." She started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very center of her being. "I'm so tired, Mama. I'm so tired of being afraid, of being told I'm wrong about everything, of feeling like I'm losing my mind. I know, mi amor. I know. But I need you to hold on for just a little longer. Because I'm going to make this right. I'm going to make him pay for what he's done to you, and I'm going to make sure Sophia never has to live with his lies." She looked up at me with those hollow eyes, and for a moment I saw a flicker of hope. "How, Mama? He has money, he has lawyers, he has everyone convinced that I'm the problem. How can we fight that?" I smiled then, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The cold, calculating satisfaction of a predator who has found her prey. "Because, my daughter, you're forgetting something very important. You're forgetting who your mother is." The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I pulled out my old briefcase, the one with the scratched leather and the brass corners that had been with me through every major case of my career. I opened it and removed something I thought I'd never use again, my law license. I had retired from teaching, but I had never formally retired from practice. My license was still active, still valid, still carrying the weight of 35 years of legal experience. That afternoon, I walked into the courthouse and filed a motion that would change everything. A motion to represent my daughter as her legal counsel in her custody case. The legal community in our city is small. Word spread quickly that Professor Elena Morales was coming out of retirement to represent her own daughter against Victor Mendoza. Lawyers who had been my students, judges who had heard me lecture, prosecutors who had worked with me on ethics cases, they all knew what this meant. Victor's lawyer, Patterson, called me within hours. "Professor Morales, I have to say I'm surprised to see you taking on a case like this. Custody battles can get quite messy, and I'm not sure it's appropriate for family members to represent each other." His voice was smooth, condescending, the voice of a man who was used to intimidating opponents into submission. "Mr. Patterson," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "I've been practicing law since before you were born. I've handled cases that would make your worst nightmares seem pleasant. And I've never lost a case where justice was on my side." "Well, of course, Professor, but we have substantial evidence of your daughter's instability. What you have, Mr. Patterson, is a house of cards built on lies and manipulation. And I'm going to burn it to the ground." There was a pause. Then, "I see. Well, I look forward to seeing you in court." "No," I said quietly. "You really don't." The night before the hearing, I sat with Sophia while Camila tried to sleep in the next room. My granddaughter was quiet, playing with her dolls, but clearly troubled. "Abuela," she said finally, "is it bad if I don't want to tell the judge what Daddy said?" I put down the legal brief I was reviewing and gave her my full attention. "What do you want to tell the judge, sweetheart?" "I want to tell him that Mommy is the best mommy in the world. I want to tell him that she makes me pancakes on Sunday mornings and helps me with my homework and reads me stories every night. I want to tell him that Mommy never forgets anything important, and when she cries, it's because she's sad about Daddy being mean, not because she's sick. My heart broke and mended itself in the same moment. Then that's what you should tell him, Sophia. Always tell the truth. It's the most important thing. But what if Daddy gets mad? Daddy won't get mad at you, sweetheart. Because after tomorrow, Daddy won't be able to hurt anyone in this family ever again. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and put on my armor. A black suit that I had worn to Supreme Court arguments. Pearl earrings that had been my mother's. The silver watch Miguel had given me for our 10th anniversary. And finally, the necklace Camila had made for me in 2nd grade, a simple chain with a small pendant that read, "World's Best Mama." I was not just Professor Elena Morales that morning. I was not just a lawyer. I was a mother, a grandmother, a woman who had spent her entire life believing in justice and was about to test that belief in the most personal way possible. When I walked into Judge Reyes's courtroom, every head turned. The gallery was packed. Word had spread about the retired professor representing her own daughter. Reporters filled the back rows. Legal colleagues I hadn't seen in years sat in the observer seats. And there, at the defendant's table, sat Victor Mendoza and his lawyer, both of them looking far less confident than they had a week before. Judge Reyes, Daniel, my former student who had grown into a man of integrity and wisdom, looked at me with a mixture of surprise and respect. "Professor Morales," he said formally, "I understand you're representing the plaintiff in this matter?" I stood, straightened my shoulders, and spoke with the voice that had commanded law school classrooms for 3 decades. "Yes, Your Honor. I am representing my daughter, Camila Mendoza, in her fight to maintain custody of her daughter, Sophia Mendoza. And I am here to expose a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and fraud that threatens the welfare of a 9-year-old child." Victor's lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, we object to this irregular arrangement. It's highly unusual for family members to represent each other in custody cases." Judge Reyes looked at me with those same thoughtful eyes that had once absorbed every word of my constitutional law lectures. "Professor Morales, do you believe you can represent your daughter's interests objectively and within the bounds of legal ethics?" I smiled, the same smile I had worn when teaching eager young minds about the sacred duty of the legal profession. "Your Honor, 35 years ago, I taught you that the law exists to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. I taught you that justice is not a concept, it's an action. Today, I'm going to show you what that looks like." Judge Reyes nodded slowly. "The court will allow Professor Morales to represent the plaintiff. Mr. Patterson, please proceed with your opening statement." Patterson stood and launched into his carefully prepared attack on my daughter. He painted her as an unstable woman who had frittered away the family's resources, who was emotionally unpredictable, who posed a danger to her own child. He presented medical records, financial statements, and witness testimony that seemed to support his narrative. He was smooth, professional, convincing. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him myself. When he finished, I stood to present my opening statement. The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling in their notebooks. "Your Honor," I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "opposing counsel has presented you with a very compelling story. It's a story about a woman who can't be trusted with her own child, who has squandered her family's resources, who suffers from mental illness that makes her unfit for motherhood." I paused, letting the weight of those accusations hang in the air. "It's a beautiful story, Your Honor. Perfectly crafted, meticulously planned, masterfully executed. There's just one problem with it." I turned to face Victor directly, my eyes locking onto his. "Every single word of it is a lie." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Reyes gavelled for silence. "Your Honor, over the next several hours, I'm going to present evidence that will show that the real threat to Sophia Mendoza's welfare is not her mother, but her father. I'm going to show you financial records proving that Victor Mendoza has systematically stolen from his wife's business to fund his own criminal enterprise. I'm going to show you medical records proving that Camila Mendoza sought therapy not because she was mentally ill, but because she was being psychologically abused. And most damning of all, I'm going to play for you a recording of Victor Mendoza coaching his 9-year-old daughter to commit perjury in this very courtroom. Victor's face went white. His lawyer started shuffling through papers frantically. "Your Honor," Patterson interrupted, "we have no knowledge of any such recording." "You will," I said calmly. "Right now." I walked to the court's audio system and inserted a USB drive. The courtroom held its breath as my voice filled the speakers, setting up the recording I had made that night 3 weeks ago. Then Victor's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Sophia, me Nina, listen to Daddy very carefully. When we go to see the judge next week, he's going to ask you some questions about Mommy." For the next 20 minutes, the courtroom listened to Victor Mendoza systematically coaching his daughter to lie about her mother. They heard him manipulate her fears, rewrite her memories, and threaten her with the loss of her home if she didn't cooperate. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. I could see tears in the eyes of several people in the gallery. Judge Reyes looked like he had been physically struck. Patterson was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this recording was obtained illegally, without consent." "Mr. Patterson," Judge Reyes said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "this recording documents a crime being committed against a child in her own home. The court will not only admit it as evidence, but will be forwarding a copy to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." I returned to my table and picked up my next exhibit. "Your Honor, I'd like to present the court with financial records obtained through legal discovery that show the true nature of Victor Mendoza's business enterprises." For the next hour, I methodically destroyed every aspect of Victor's case. I showed the judge bank records proving that Victor had stolen over $200,000 from Camila's business accounts. I presented evidence of his money laundering operation, his offshore accounts, his connections to organized crime. I brought in Dr. Sarah Henderson, the therapist Camila had been seeing, who testified that my daughter showed classic signs of psychological abuse, not mental illness. I presented testimony from Inspector Cruz, who had investigated Victor's business and found evidence of fraud, tax evasion, and racketeering. But the most powerful moment came when I called Sophia to the witness stand. My granddaughter walked to the front of the courtroom in her best dress, her dark hair pulled back with the ribbon Camila had braided for her that morning. She looked so small in the witness chair, so young and vulnerable. "Sophia," I said gently, "do you know why we're here today?" "Yes, Abuela. We're here so the judge can decide where I should live." "And where do you want to live, sweetheart?" "With Mommy. I want to live with Mommy." Patterson started to stand, but Judge Reyes silenced him with a look. "Sophia, has anyone told you what to say to the judge today?" She glanced at her father, then looked back at me with those brave, innocent eyes. "Daddy told me to say that Mommy forgets things and doesn't take care of me. But that's not true. Mommy takes really good care of me. She makes me breakfast every morning and helps me with my homework and reads me stories at night. When I'm sick, she stays home from work to take care of me. When I'm scared, she holds me until I feel better." Her voice was clear and strong, carrying the simple truth that no amount of legal maneuvering could obscure. "Daddy said I should say Mommy is sick, but Mommy isn't sick. Mommy just gets sad sometimes because Daddy yells at her. And that makes me sad too." I looked at Victor, saw him slumped in his chair, his perfect facade finally cracking. His lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to salvage a case that was disintegrating before his eyes. "Thank you, Sophia. You've been very brave." As my granddaughter returned to her seat, I turned to address the court one final time. "Your Honor, in my 35 years of practicing law, I have seen many cases of domestic abuse. I have seen men who use the legal system as a weapon against their victims. I have seen predators who manipulate children and exploit their innocence for personal gain. My voice rose, carrying the weight of every lesson I had ever taught, every principle I had ever believed in. But I have never seen a case as clear-cut as this one. Victor Mendoza is not seeking custody of his daughter out of love or concern for her welfare. He is seeking custody as the final act of control over a woman he has spent years destroying. He has stolen her money, isolated her from her support system, convinced her that she was losing her mind, and now he wants to steal her child. I turned to face Victor directly. But he made one critical mistake. He threatened my granddaughter. He tried to turn an innocent child into an accomplice to his crimes. And in doing so, he awakened something he should have left sleeping. I faced the judge again. Your Honor, I taught you once that justice is not passive. Justice is not neutral. Justice takes action to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. Today, I ask you to do justice. Give Sophia back to her mother. Give Camila back her daughter. And make sure Victor Mendoza never has the power to hurt this family again. The courtroom was silent as I returned to my seat. Judge Reyes looked at his notes, looked at the evidence spread across his bench, looked at Sophia sitting beside her mother. Mr. Patterson, do you have any rebuttal evidence to present? Patterson stood slowly, looking like a man who had just watched his career explode. No, Your Honor. The defense rests. Judge Reyes nodded grimly. In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case where the facts were so clear and the stakes so high. The evidence presented today shows a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and criminal activity that is both shocking and heartbreaking. He looked directly at Victor. Mr. Mendoza, you have systematically abused your wife, stolen her assets, and attempted to manipulate your own daughter into committing perjury. You have shown a complete disregard for the welfare of your family and a willingness to destroy innocent people for your own benefit. Then he turned to Camila. Ms. Mendoza, you have been the victim of terrible abuse, but you have shown remarkable strength and courage. Most importantly, you have raised a daughter who knows the difference between truth and lies, between love and manipulation. Finally, he looked at me. Professor Morales, you taught me many years ago that the law is only as strong as the people who are willing to fight for it. Today, you have reminded me why I became a judge. He raised his gavel. The court finds that Victor Mendoza is unfit to have custody of Sophia Mendoza. Full custody is awarded to Camila Mendoza, with no visitation rights for the father pending the outcome of criminal charges that will be filed based on the evidence presented today. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Furthermore, the court orders the immediate return of all assets stolen from Camila Mendoza's business accounts, plus damages. And Mr. Mendoza, you are hereby ordered to have no contact with the plaintiff or the minor child. The courtroom erupted in applause. Reporters rushed for the doors to file their stories. Camila collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief and joy. But I wasn't done yet. As Victor was being escorted from the courtroom by bailiffs, as his lawyer tried to disappear into the crowd, I stood and called out, "Victor." He turned, his face a mask of rage and defeat. "I told you I would destroy you if you hurt my daughter. I keep my promises." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my daughter's garden, watching Sophia play with her dog while Camila tends to her vegetable patch. The house is filled with laughter again. The shadows have lifted. The healing has begun. Victor was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for money laundering, fraud, and child endangerment. His assets were seized to pay restitution to his victims, including the $200,000 he stole from Camila's business. Camila's marketing company is thriving again. She's hired 3 new employees and just signed a contract with the city's largest hospital system. More importantly, she's smiling again. Really smiling, not the forced brightness she wore during those dark years. Sophia is back to being a normal 9-year-old, playing soccer, reading chapter books, arguing with her mother about bedtime. She's in therapy to help her process what happened, but she's resilient. Children are stronger than we think when they're surrounded by love and truth. As for me, I've hung up my briefcase for good this time. But I've started teaching again, not at the university, but at the local women's shelter, helping abuse victims understand their legal rights, showing them that the law can be a weapon for justice, not just oppression. I think about that promise I made to 7-year-old Camila all those years ago. No man will ever silence your voice. It took longer than I hoped, and the battle was harder than I expected, but I kept that promise. Because that's what mothers do. We keep our promises. We protect our children. And when the law fails to protect them, we become the law. A courtroom is just a room. Justice is just a word. But when you combine them with a mother's love and a lifetime of legal knowledge, they become something powerful enough to topple monsters and restore broken families. That's the truth I want to leave you with today. Justice isn't something that happens to you, it's something you make happen. It's not a guarantee, it's a choice. And sometimes, when everything else fails, it's something you have to fight for with everything you have. If you were in my place, would you fight or would you forgive? Would you have stood up to a man like Victor, knowing the risks, knowing the cost? Would you have gambled everything on the belief that truth and justice are stronger than lies and manipulation? Comment below and let me know. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, there's another mother watching her daughter suffer, another grandmother seeing her grandchild being manipulated, another family being destroyed by someone who thinks they're too powerful to be stopped. They need to know that monsters can be defeated. They need to know that the law, when wielded by someone who truly understands justice, is still the most powerful weapon we have against evil. They need to know that sometimes, when a retired law professor walks into a courtroom to save her family, the gavel drops in shock because justice has just walked through the door. And justice never sleeps. It just waits for the right moment to strike. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't leave yet. I have 2 more powerful stories of families fighting back against impossible odds. Stories that will remind you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they fight for the people they love.